everyone. Welcome to Rogue Record Music. I'm your host, Rob, and welcome to episode 5, Entry Points. More on the topic in just a second. Apologize that I'm slowly getting the channel up and running. I'm trying to record a bunch of episodes in a row to hopefully batch some episodes so I could get content out to you more on a regular basis and come up with some kind of schedule for release date. I haven't figured that out yet. This is a work in progress, but thanks for tuning in, those of you that have subscribed. If you have not subscribed, click the link down below, the subscribe button, and hit that bell so you get notifications of when I put new episodes up. Hopefully it's not once a month. Hopefully it's a little bit more frequently. We'll do more specials and have guests come on the show and do different things from time to time, and hopefully bring some other podcasters on this as well that I love and respect what they do on their music podcast. Another way to get a hold of me is through some of the social medias that I have for Rogue Record Music. I'm on X, formerly Twitter, at Rogue Rec Music, and hopefully that's coming up here on the screen if I remember to put that up there. That's ROGUERECMUSIC. With the @ symbol for people that may not be on Twitter. And if you are on Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/Rogue Record Music. And like I said, I'm hoping to have an Instagram coming up really soon. And I'll be putting up some reels and some different things of episodes that are coming down the pipeline. So, like I said, welcome to episode 5. And I'm starting to kind of get into the weeds of my music collection and some of the different things that I like and have listened to, and some different avenues to talk about albums and artists and all of that encompassing. I was trying to think of a different topic to kind of start on and do some type of a list. And all of the lists here are in 9. This is coming off of my KISS podcast, where we have this thing called the 9. And it's a kind of a fun way to, everybody does a top 10 list. We thought we would do 9. Long story short, a lot of rock music and some of KISS's albums only had 9 songs on them. And we thought, well, that's kind of cool. So that was kind of our shtick that Nick and Nico and I came up with on Right Between the Eyes podcast. And I thought, with this one kind of being a sister podcast to that, I would continue the 9. So I think if we wait for it, the 9 is coming in right now.
Welcome to the 9. You may only choose 9 to move forward. No more, no less. The 9 is here.
All right, all of our lists, or once we review an album, if there's 10 tracks, 12 tracks, whatever, I will whittle those down to the top 9 songs that I think should be on the album as kind of a launching off point for a discussion. This is a 9 list, and entry points I thought would be a good topic to do, to kind of revisit every now and then. There's so much music that I have, and these lists would be long. Like the very first episode, I think I had picked 52 albums and whittled that down to 9. I'm not doing that here. I only have 9 albums here, but coming up with any list, and I think that's the fun part about making lists, or your favorite TV shows or your favorite actors or musicians or whatever, coming up with a list and saying, these are my favorite. And then you start thinking, oh, well, what about this show? What about that? Well, with collecting as much music as I have over the years and the vast variety of styles and genres that I have, these lists get harder and harder to do. So I'll probably do them in volumes. So this is Entry Point Volume 1, and there will be Volume 2, 3, 4, etc. down the line as a topic that I can revisit to bring in some other things. So what is Entry Point? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. At what point did you discover a band or an artist where the criteria for this is they already had to have had an existing catalog before you? So I'm trying to keep it like, oh, I came on to the second album. In some cases, that's how it is. But most of the artists that I have here, I think all of them actually, have had 5+ more or albums behind them. Or in some cases, this might be their 5th album or their 10th album when I discovered them. We're still kind of staying in the rock genre. I had a couple other artists. I had a Richard Marx in here. I did have a Michael Jackson in here. And I even kind of had a jazz artist in here. But I thought I'll kind of keep this one more rock and roll centered. And the time frame is right around the same thing. So I'm still kind of playing into that high school, junior high frame. And then, one album does break into the 2000s as I'm kind of looking here off to the side of my list. So, but most everything is late 80s into the 90s, and with one being in the 2000s. And some of these artists, go clear back to the 60s or 70s, or they were, started in the 80s. So I thought that would be kind of a fun thing to do here, is to go through, again, when you're collecting anything for as long as maybe I have, it's fun to pull some of this stuff out, revisit it. And sometimes that'll go, man, I haven't listened to this album in such a long time. That's giving me the excuse to rediscover some of this music. Or in some cases, I've been listening to it forever and I know all these songs by heart, and, could sit on a drum set and play them, and, all that fun stuff. So this is it in no particular order. A couple of them are, I try to put them in an order of kind of importance, but again, with having so much music on hand, these are just kind of in a order, but not like this is the definitive. So let's just get into it.
9.
Coming in at number 9 on my list today for entry points of when I discovered a band, when did I hop on the bandwagon? But something else I should have said, I have followed all of these artists still currently to this day, if they were still putting out music, or if they haven't retired, or members have passed away, etc., etc. So that may not be the case all the time in the list, but for generally most of these, I have, once I became a fan of the band, I became a long time fan of the band. So this was released in 1988, and their previous album is the album that broke them wide open. They were everywhere in 1988. If you had MTV like I did back in the late 80s, when my father finally caved in and said, okay, we're going to get cable, of course I was glued to MTV. What kid or teenager in 1980, whatever, was not glued to MTV in its heyday? Talking about a band from New Jersey. Now, the album that you're probably thinking of is what broke this band, because they were halfway there. I did not buy that album, referring to Slippery When Wet, right at that time, because in the days of, having really good friends, they would make mixtapes, or, hey, I would say Burn, could you copy that for me? Or could you make a tape of that for me? So the album, as my entry point, was Bon Jovi, New Jersey. I'm holding it in my face here. So this copy, I had lost mine. I had a girlfriend in high school, and there's her initial. You can actually see her name written right there. Somehow my copy got mixed up with her copy, and her copy got mixed up with my copy. So we each had one, and for some reason I have her copy and she probably still has mine. But that counts, to think like, wow, do I have anything from an old high school girlfriend? Yes, apparently I do. So it's been on a shelf for quite a while, which, I've only have been seeing it like this forever. So it wasn't until I pulled it out and I was like, oh, that's right, we messed up copies somehow. Anyway, Bon Jovi, New Jersey. So the album that broke Bon Jovi wide open was, of course, Slippery When Wet, which was released just, a couple years prior. I think it might have been in 87, and this one comes right out towards mid-September, if I've got that information correct. But, you've got Born to Be My Baby and Bad Medicine, I'll Be There For You, Blood on Blood, and the hits off this album just keep going and going. So with New Jersey being the album that really, Slippery When Wet being the album that really broke Bon Jovi into the mainstream of, you couldn't go anywhere and not hear Bon Jovi. When this album came out, if you can believe it or not, those of us that, grew up in this time frame, Bon Jovi even elevated themselves higher and were, huge road warriors. Of course, they were all over MTV, and they get the, feather in their cap of saying that they are the ones that kind of helped started MTV Unplugged. By the tail end of the New Jersey tour cycle, they appeared on the MTV Video Music Awards, just John and Richie, and played a melody of songs acoustically. They didn't even know if they really wanted to do that because they had literally just gotten off like a 2 or almost 3 year tour supporting this album. And John and Richie said, okay, we'll just come in and we'll just play acoustic. We're either going to do it acoustically or we're not going to do it at all, when MTV wanted the full band there. And the rest of the band was like, nope, we're not doing it. So that performance on MTV Video Music Awards really helped launch the MTV Unplugged series and gave us a version of Bon Jovi that was always kind of there with the I'll Be There For You and those type of songs that really lent themselves to that ballad acoustic version. And even Wanted Dead or Alive, I think they played those two songs back to back. But this was one that I actually got it, I think, into 1989, since it was September by the time February rolled around for my birthday. I remember two of my good friends, I believe it was Chad Mossbarger and Alan Nepper, I think, got this. They pooled their money together and got this for me for my birthday in February of that year. So unfortunately, guys, she has my tape and I have her tape, but technically, this is that. But, listening to this tape when spring finally broke of that year, and my friends were coming over, we were playing basketball at my house. This was one of those tapes that I was still constantly listening to because, again, Bon Jovi was just anywhere. So coming in at number 9, it is Bon Jovi, New Jersey, my official entry point into becoming a Bon Jovi fan.
8.
Coming in at number 8, this album was released in 1990, and the next two on this list are also released in 1990. So this was a big year for me for jumping on and finding entry points for the bands that I'm going to put up here. And this band in particular was one that made me think of this particular episode and just having a fondness for this album. And it was actually my best friend Ben bringing this album in. Now, I do have a short little history with it because of a classmate in art class gave me Operation Mindcrime when I was really starting to get into Kiss. And for whatever reason, I really wasn't listening to it. I didn't know who it was. And he kind of had, that vibe in school. If my mother knew I was talking to him, she would kind of freak out. So it was one of those where I was like, I don't know what he's trying to give me, so I'm really not going to listen to it. So I let it set for almost a year. And when Ben brought this album into school and was talking about hearing the song Best I Can, and it was such a really cool song, that he bought Empire from Queensryche. And this is the album that also broke Queensryche wide open. Operation Mindcrime was one that really had people primed in discovering who Queensryche was. And Operation Mindcrime, I believe, was their 4th album. So this comes in at number 5, if I'm doing my math right. Hopefully I'll put something here if I get that wrong. But this is one that put Queensryche in the stratosphere, where early on they were opening up for Metallica for Metallica's Black Album. By the midway through the album cycle, they were now becoming a headliner themselves, when previously they were just an opening act. And, coming off of songs like Best I Can, Jet City Woman, Another Rainy Night, and of course the huge hit Silent Lucidity comes off of this, and a very underrated track. Anybody listening, and Hand on Heart, this is just a fantastic album all the way through. And speaking of MTV Unplugged, they would do an MTV Unplugged performance that is really awe-inspiring, and is one that was never officially released by MTV or by the band, other than in a box set that was released in the early 2000s. Every one of the studio albums that they played a song from on MTV Unplugged appears as a bonus track or two on that album. So Silent Lucidity is on the remastered version, and Della Brown was also performed off this album. So those two songs appear on the remastered version of this. But this was one that really opened the floodgates for Queensryche to me, and it was starting to get me into that progressive metal where Dream Theater was just a couple years down the road. Actually, 2 years down the road, Dream Theater would come around, but gave me that taste of what longer song lengths could be, dueling guitar solos and more instrumental sections and just soaring vocals. And then, of course, I went back to listen to Operation Mindcrime and was really taken aback by that album. So I always kind of pair these two albums together as kind of being an entry point, but this is the literal first step where, you know, Ben made me a copy of this. And I remember riding around in his car listening to it. I'm like, oh, you're going to have to make a copy of that. And I think maybe I had that cassette tape for a couple weeks till I had enough money, went to the record store, and then bought this actual version on CD and still have it to this day. But what a fantastic album this is. Maybe looking at the list of albums, I probably should have put this higher, but I've been listening to this a lot lately. So Queensryche, Empire, released in 1990, comes in at number 8.
7.
Coming in at number 7 is a slight little deviation in subject matter, but not in style of music. So I'm getting into the Christian rock scene right here. And this album came out in 1990. And this is one that just surprised me. And again, name dropping my best friend Ben. Both he and I were hooked on this band right from the get-go. At the concert, leading up to the concert, I think I talked about this in the albums that got me through high school, is I remember our youth leader, Aletha, playing some music by Petra leading up to the show that we were going to take, or she was going to take the youth group to the Ohio State Fair that year to go see the band play live. Nowadays, taking a youth group to go see any Christian band, I mean, you're getting kids lined up all day long because Christian music is so huge for these last 10, 15, 20 years that it had slow goings early on. You might have been looked at a little funny, like, oh, you listen to Christian music, and things kind of seemed cheesy and corny at some points, and it was hard for the music to seem relevant to, you know, youth at the time. You know, we didn't have the Canes and Casting Crowns and Newsboys, Stephen Curtis Chapman's, or whoever's. You know, we had Carmen and, you know, Anne Murray a little bit, and Sandy Patty, and I'm trying to think, David Meese, which I liked David Meese. But I think that came out of liking this band and finding something like, oh, that speaks to me musically. That feels like something that I'm currently listening to, and there's a message in there. You know, I was already going to church, so I already had a belief and structure system. But, you know, the music we were singing in church was just old church hymns, and, you know, Ben and I were like, if we put a guitar and drums to this, you know, we could probably really rock this out. And that was like, oh, we don't listen to that. We don't listen to rock and roll. So I remember going to the state fair, and I think my friend Alan might have been with me. Alan and Chad, they might have gone too. I'm trying to remember, but I mean, our youth group was huge at this point. I remember trying to not go to the show and finding ways to kind of get lost at the state fair, and knew, like, okay, what time the band was playing and about the time they'd be over, so that way we could be back at the grandstands when they're done, and we'll meet everybody. But they were sitting in a group, and God bless Aletha for finding us and probably dragging us back, and thought, oh, this is going to be cheesy. I don't know what these guys think they're going to try and sing or play, but this is probably going to be a horrible experience. And it could not be farther from the truth. It was an amazing show. And I remember talking to Ben, and he was like, I was trying to tell you, this is going to be good. I was just amazed. I was amazed at how well they played. I was amazed at the sound of the music. that it was instantly singable. It wasn't cheesy, and there was something real about it. I'm talking about Petra Beyond Belief, released in 1990. This was one of those albums I would say changed my life in a different way, that I looked at music in a different way, and I looked at what Christian music could be and had respect for. Not that I had like disrespect, if that's a word, the way that I'm using it. I disrespected them, but it wasn't something that I thought I could stand behind to go, I'm a Christian. I love this album, and it says something to me. It speaks to me, and it's just really cool. There's guitar solos, there's drum solos, keyboard solos, soaring high vocals, a killer bass line. This really, really changed my life in a way that had meaning and depth to it, which, there's a lot of other music that I love on here, but this really opened the door to what other Christian bands and artists would be coming down the line. And this is, I can't remember what album this is, but this is in their second era with a new lead singer. This is only the lead singer's third album with the band. And this was a resurgence for Petra. And this would really start to propel Petra in a higher and different way than they had been previously. Again, in the day and age of music videos, they had a long form video that I remember watching and thought, well, this is actually really pretty cool. And again, it was a set for 5 music videos to go into it. So this was really cool, and an album that I'm dying to get on vinyl. They've started to reissue some of the John Schlitt era. He's the lead singer for the band at this point. And so I've got some of the remastered CDs, and I want to get some remastered vinyl, because it's one thing to go to a Christian music store and buy cassettes and CDs. It was another thing to try and get vinyl, especially into the 90s and 2000s. If vinyl was drying up for the mainstream artists, it was even harder to get vinyl pressed for Christian artists. So it would be in places in, Brazil and Argentina that may get vinyl pressings if you see them. And if you see them on eBay, they're very, very expensive. So I'm glad that they partnered with somebody to start repressing their music on vinyl in the US, and it's available on Amazon. So I'm going to try and pick up a couple of them just so I can have some of it on vinyl. But a big one for me, number 7, Petra, Beyond Belief.
6.
The church bells have just been going off as I was talking about Petra. So that's really kind of fitting that, it's currently 6:00 here where I live, and the church bells chime at the hour. And it's fitting that the next album is also a Christian band, that for some of us, if you knew who Petra was, they existed before this band, but a band that really kind of to bring in Christian music into a modern era was Stryper, the 1990 release of Against the Law. Now, having said that, this is not a Christian album. The album previously was In God We Trust, and the album before that was To Hell with the Devil. So they got together with a new producer, and they looked at this like a gateway album, trying to make an album towards the mainstream rock fans to pull them into what they were doing. So all but one song on here, Rock the Hell Out of You, could be more of a straight ahead, but if you really listen to it, they're really threading in the Christian message in that one particular song. But everything else is just kind of a normal traditional rock song, if you will, all positive, uplifting messages and songs, all for one and one for all. That's who we will be. Songs like that, Two Bodies, One Mind, One Soul, Lady, a beautiful ballad that Michael Sweet wrote for his wife. Caught in the Middle, Rock the People. That's another really cool song that, again, kind of threads. If you know who Stryper is, you can realize that they're talking about themselves and the mission that they're on. And the funny thing about this, as they had kind of stepped away, not from their faith, but kind of went away from what they were doing subject wise. This album eventually broke up the band in that Michael Sweet left, as he knew, like, we're starting to go down a path I don't know if we should go down, because they lost their focus. Even though they were playing their old catalog stuff on this tour, Michael Sweet actually left towards the tail end of the tour, and the band finished out as a trio. And it wouldn't be until 2001 that the band would reunite and start recording again with proper Christian themed music. And they're still going strong today. It was actually at a Striper convention that the band reconvened and decided, you know what, this is something that we want to do again. So a lot of time had gone by from the release of this in 1990, and things had changed, and Striper got refocused. But as sometimes Michael Sweet looks back at this and says, I don't know if we should have done that. This was an album that pulled a lot of people in as Striper fans, and then gave us this placeholder to be in, that we started dipping our toes into their older catalog stuff and thought, wow, it's still the same band. They're singing about Christ. It's still great. And it's awesome to know now that they are still putting out music, and they're currently in the studio right now getting ready to release another album. And they just continue to churn out albums year after year after year, starting in 2002, and they have not looked back. So Striper, Against the Law, a great album, great album, a great sounding album. So if you kind of want to dip your toe in, this is the album to do it on. But definitely go check out their older stuff and currently their new stuff.
5.
Coming in at number 5 is a band I absolutely love. They're, depending on the day, that could be my second favorite band or my third favorite band. Probably number 3, but it's so very close. I'm talking about Seven Dust and their album Seasons. This came out in 2003. So they were a late 90s band in the new metal by ways of Godsmack and Disturbed. They were actually the forefront. Power Man 5000 was right around this time. So they were kind of one of the OGs, again, with like Limp Bizkit. They actually predate Godsmack just by a few months. And the funny thing is about, doing something like this, talking about entry points, I'm struggling to remember how I discovered them. It had to be through MTV, towards the latter part of MTV, where MTV was really struggling, and you had VH1 kind of doing music. And I remember seeing the song for Enemy on MTV, and I remember going, oh, who is this band? I had a roommate that said, you don't know who Seven Dust is? And I said, I think I do. And he played me a couple tracks, and I was like, oh, okay. And for whatever reason, it didn't grab me back then, but just a few years after their first 3 albums were released, this one came out in 2003, and this just hit me like a lead brick. And it only been a couple years since I had been divorced, and I feel like every song off this album just spoke to me in some type of a way where, I was the first of my group of friends that had gone through anything like this, gone through a divorce. Some weren't married yet, or some had just been married just about as long as I had been, and were still married. So it was something like, well, almost treating it like, you'll meet somebody else. It's different than having a girlfriend in high school, or having a girlfriend just any point in general. When you marry somebody, trying to express how I was feeling, that's what I felt like almost every song off this album did. Songs like A Broken and Skeleton Song, Disgrace. If there's one song that you need to listen off to this, it is Disgrace. I remember driving around listening to this album. When I got to Disgrace, I must have played it 4 or 5 times, and I just kept driving around because I was half broken up. I just, like, the tears were just coming down, where I was like, this is exactly how I'm feeling, where I felt like, oh my gosh, it's not like I was the first person in the world to go through a divorce, but it was something that I had a way of articulating and learning how to deal with that. And I could, express that through a song when I was starting to feel down, or like, I'm not going to find anybody, or I can't deal with it. I would put in this album, and it just really lifted me up in a place where I was like, man, I wonder what the guys that wrote this were going through. So a fantastic album, my favorite by the band, and one I just can't recommend enough. Yes, there's a parental advisory sticker on there, so there is some language in there, but just what an amazing album. So do yourself a favor, listen to the track Disgrace, and you will thank me for it.
4.
Number 4, a band that had been around since the late 70s, was actually found by this guy right there, Gene Simmons. If I look at him, there we go. Met Alex Van Halen and Eddie Van Halen and did some demos for them. And the next thing we knew, we got Van Halen 1. And that's not where I discovered them. I would discover them a lot later. And if I go back and I can think of the songs I would hear on the rock radio stations, I could probably pick out the Van Halen song. Oh, I think that's that band Van Halen. And I remember Jump, of course, because of MTV. In Panama, that was all over the place, and Hot for the Teacher. But I still wasn't there with Van Halen. I liked it. I loved it. I knew that Eddie Van Halen played on Michael Jackson's Thriller album, playing the track Beat It. And you could just hear that guitar and go, oh, that's the same guy. But I still wasn't there. It wouldn't be until they lose David Lee Roth and get a new singer that would pull me in. So I knew about 5150 and had really liked 5150, liked the music that I heard there, but it still didn't quite have me just yet until this album came out, OU 812, and with songs like When It's Love, Black and Blue, So Good, Sucker in a Three-Piece Suit, Finish What You Started were all over MTV. I don't know what it was about this album, but I immediately went backwards, bought 5150, bought the first Van Halen album, bought Diver Down, and kind of went backwards through the catalog sporadically and became a huge Van Halen fan. My era of Van Halen is right around here. I even like the Gary Cherone Van Halen 3 album, Don't At Me. I love that album. That was also the first time I saw Van Halen live. Would have liked to have seen him with Sammy. I saw Sammy live separately. But this era of Van Halen, especially getting to For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, is my favorite Van Halen album. But this one is my entry point, and was one once I got it on cassette and eventually got it on CD. I just played it over and over again. And then when For Unlawful came out, that was my go-to Van Halen album. But this is the entry point for me. A fantastic album, and when It's Love comes on the radio, it just, I don't know, it just does something. It makes you want to grab that girl and go to the dance floor and just hope the song just lasts forever. And it's just saying everything you want to say. How do I know when it's love? I can tell you, because it lasts forever. And right now in your head, you're doing all the na-na-nas. Yeah, just a brilliant, Eddie Van Halen, rest in peace. My gosh, what a beautiful album this is, and what a great entry point for a Van Halen fan.
3.
Okay, we're coming down towards the end here. These three are kind of in the order that they are. Most of them are on this list are, but these three I put in a specific order. I feel like if I could find the clip from Wayne's World where they were talking about Frampton comes alive and says, everybody got that album with boxes of Tide in the mail. If you had MTV and you were listening to music in 1987, this band was all over the place. Talk about tragedies that have befallen this band. Their drummer would lose an arm during the making of this album after having a very successful album in Pyromania. Previously, it took them almost 4.5 years to record this album and had put so much money, so much time, so much effort, so much heartbreak into this and so much tragedy in the band, and not knowing if their drummer, is going to be, how is a one-armed drummer going to be able to play drums? And they release a multi-platinum album that I believe everybody and their brother had this album. If you are my age, you know all about Hysteria. 1987 marks a time in junior high school with just discovering who you are in the place in this world. And, hey, I think I kind of like girls. I don't know how to talk to girls. I'm an awkward kid. The guys will sit on one side of a dance floor. The girls will sit on the other side of a dance floor, and you'll go watch your buddy get shot down to go ask the girl to go dance. But if you were lucky enough to dance to Love Bites, like, oh my gosh, that's great. The amount of songs released off this, you had Women, Rocket, Animal, Pour Some Sugar on Me, Love Bites, Armageddon. I'm probably missing some here. Just a mammoth of an album, and one that the band was like, they were swinging for the fences, and this album would just launch. If Pyromania, kind of brought them into the forefront, this is what took them around the globe a million times and finally broke them in the United States. And this is a masterful album. And this is an album where Mutt Lange, that produced this album, said, I want to help you guys create an album that's already a greatest hits when it's released. You can pull almost all the songs off that I just listed here and find them all on Def Leppard's greatest hits album, with a bazillion other songs. That there are so many songs that kept this band in the number one position for so long on your dial MTVs, on your radio stations. You still hear Pour Some Sugar on Me, Hysteria, but title track. There's the other song. Such a cool song. The layers of guitars and vocals. It's just, this was one when I was delivering newspapers, riding around on my bike. This was on my route a lot. We listened to this song a lot. Played it quite a bit in junior high and all the way through high school. So it was great in junior high listening to it. Def Leppard, if I moved just a little bit, there's their other one right there. But at my graduation. So these two I really pair together, as everything's backwards here. That would be Adrenalized. But this is my entry point, Def Leppard, and they're still putting out music, and man, I have not looked back. What in one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time.
2.
All right, coming in at number 2, and this probably should be number 1, but I'm using number 1 as a backdoor to the next episode. So this is the album that made me a longtime fan. It is what 90% of all the merchandise that you see here around on the shelves. It is what helped start my other podcast, Right Between the Eyes. I'm talking about Kiss. I'm talking about 1989's album, Hot in the Shade. And it's signed by Bruce Kulick, the guitar player. I met him at a Kiss convention a while back. I can't remember if this is, he came to the Guitar Ranch in Findlay. I don't know if I got him to sign Hot in the Shade there or if I got him to sign it at a Kiss convention, but regardless, I've got his signature. Talking about the guy in art class, I had just discovered this. I remember December 2nd, 1989, as if it was yesterday, coming home from being cold and wet and covered in snow and sludge from our Christmas in the Village that our church and town would put on every year. I had cable. Ben came up to the house because he knew I was always recording MTV and Headbangers Ball. So to go get warm, we took our hot chocolate or whatever we had, went to the house, and just goofing around as, teens would. My sister had a surgery on her foot and had some crutches still left over from that. And we were doing air guitars to, the videos that I was had recorded on MTV, and Hide Your Heart came up. And we already had some kind of previous knowledge with Kiss. Ben had Crazy Nights about a year earlier. And like, I don't know, is Kiss bad? Should we be listening to Kiss? And the whole makeup thing kind of gave us the heebie-jeebies a little bit or something. Or, mom saying, don't listen to Kiss. They're bad, all that type of silly stuff. And then here we are in 1989 seeing Kiss, sans makeup. They had taken the makeup off back in 1983. So remember songs like Heaven's on Fire, Tears Are Falling, Crazy Nights, kind of had known some of the stuff. But the music video for Hide Your Heart, Ben and I were just like, holy cow, that's great. In my mind, we probably rewound that tape 10 times, 20 times, whatever. Could have been only 2 or 3, but we were just obsessed with the song. And if memory serves me right, I want to say this was on a Saturday. And I don't know if the record store was open on Sunday, but I believe within a day or two, Ben and I had gone to Finders Tapes and CDs, and we had each bought the cassette, which cassette's just up out of frame. I would later get this through a CD Club BMG. Later on, once CDs really started becoming prevalent. And this is one of those albums, if you ask any diehard Kiss fan, this is kind of low on their list, but I always jokingly say you never forget your first kiss, and you never forget your first kiss. People listening to music nowadays, it wasn't that way when we were growing up. We didn't have Spotify, Apple Music, couldn't hop on YouTube and just listen to stuff at random. You were listening to whatever the radio stations put out or what the videos that were on MTV, or you only had enough money to buy 1, 2 cassettes if you were lucky. If you walked out of a record store with 2 albums, you felt like, man, I hit the jackpot. So back when I only had 1 Kiss album, I know all of these songs front to back, every single note, every single lyric. And, we talk about on Right Between the Eyes podcast doing an episode called I Didn't Know I Wasn't Supposed to Like That. This fits in that category. You talk to some Kiss fans like, oh, I don't know, Hide Your Heart, it's bloated. It's got 15 songs on it. 15 songs, that's great. For a kid in 1989 or actually 1990 when I got this album, that was great that, in 89 when I got it. They would tour in 1990, but mom wouldn't let me go. But, when you only had 1 album by an artist, you just listened to it over and over again. We were lucky that Ben had Crazy Nights, so he quickly made me, a blank tape version of that. So we had 2 Kiss albums to listen to for a while. So we really cut our teeth on, 2 Kiss albums that we still hold up very high. So if you're an 80s, 90s Kiss fan, this is great. And the big song that comes off of this is Forever, co-written by Michael Bolton. So this was what gave Kiss like a new step back up of kind of like retaking some of the mantle of who and what they once were. And, Forever was all over MTV. It was all over the radio. I remember being in art class and hearing Forever going, my Kiss, my version of Kiss has a song on the radio. It's not Rock and Roll All Night. It's not I Was Made for Loving You. It was Forever. It was Hide Your Heart, or it was I'm gonna rise to it. Kiss, Forever, coming in at number 2.
1.
All right, number 1. And this one is going to come out of left field. Still rock and roll, still 60s rock and roll. And talking about MTV, the resurgence for this band in the time that, they were a 60s band. Their previous album, Changes, came out in 1970. And this album came out in 1987. And with a big help from MTV when, MTV was still very new and trying to find what were even considered music videos. They were just like music performances as artists were starting to get into this new format as a way to put on content to keep MTV rolling 24 hours. This band had a television show in the 60s. So you got to know who I'm talking about. They were my very first concert. This is not the first album I would get by them. That would be their greatest hits called Then and Now. But this really cemented me of going, okay, I am a fan of this band. I'm a diehard fan of this band. It is the Monkees' Pool It. I would see the Monkees on their 1989 tour, again, with Ben. We saw them the day before, on a Sunday before our first day of high school, my first day of high school. And Ben, I believe it was his sophomore, or it'd be his junior year of high school. A little math, or the lack of math maybe for this guy, and the overachieving of math on his guy separated us a little bit in school, even though I'm older. But anyway, the Monkees. I love this album, and it was, again, having a friend in Ben. We listened to this, and kind of, he wasn't as big as a Monkees fan as I was, but we still, obviously went to that concert. Our youth leader, Aletha, took us to that show. She was a huge diehard Monkees fan, and was the one, once I discovered the Monkees and she knew that we liked the Monkees, then it just kind of became like, oh my gosh, like how are you guys discovering the Monkees? We're like, because of MTV and watching the TV show on MTV. And then that spurred them to reunite, put out a greatest hits, record a couple new songs. And then a couple years later, they would put out this album. So I had my own version of the Monkees. Mike Nesmith, would only tour with the band when they were out in California. So they're basically a trio with Peter, Mike, and Davey. And sadly, Mickey is the only one, maybe I said Mike, but Mickey is the only one that is still with us to this day. Davey and Peter, and then Michael just recently passed a couple years ago. So I have such fond memories of this album. I love this album. And literally yesterday, today is Saturday when I'm filming this, I went to a place called Jeffrey's Antiques just off of an interstate where I live, and I'm always looking for vinyl and different things, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack when I saw this album. It was right in the front. I cannot believe I found a vinyl copy of this album. I could see it from about this much, and because somebody was standing in front of it, and I remember going, oh my gosh, how expensive is this going to be? Again, like I said, in 1980 something, where vinyl is really kind of scarce to come by, this becomes like a $50 or $60 record all day long, and in great condition. And this is pretty darn close. Not quite mint, but very close. I've seen this go high as $100 because they were printed, but you really kind of had to know where to look at. And you could still get vinyl in 1987, but the Monkees starts to get really kind of scarce. So the fact that I've got this first pressing of the album, I can't believe that I have this. I have yet to play it. I'm probably going to play it here probably this evening, or maybe tomorrow. But the reason that this is the last on the list is that the next episode, I'm going to have a good friend of mine come over here from On the Flythe. That's the name of his podcast, Stevie. And he is also a big Monkees fan. So our next episode is going to be an all Monkees episode of how we discovered it. And we will pick our top 9 Monkees songs. And you definitely know some songs from this are going to be on here. And, if anybody remembers the show My Two Dads, Davy Jones would appear as a regular character on that TV show. And I remember going, I knew who that was. And my mom going, hey, one of your Monkees is on TV. And, come running in, where, I was a fan of the show, but once he was on there, I was glued, because I didn't know when the next time Davy Jones was going to come on the show. So that is going to round out my entry point albums. What are some of yours? What is an album that made you a fan of the band? May not have to be necessarily your favorite album by the band, but what is that album that made you a fan and then you continue to follow well past that album? Again, we'll do another version of this for a volume 2 somewhere down the road, but tune in for the next episode. If you're a fan of the Monkees, and if you're not, go find your parents, go find your grandparents, find somebody, because it's going to be nothing but peace, love, and happiness for the Monkees on our next episode. So we'll see you next time. Come back into Rogue Record Music and we'll see what's on the rack.